And when I got to Luther East and I began teaching, we had 7 periods. We offered 7 classes. The drawback was we would oftentimes, because of our size, have classes that were monstrous in number, or you would end up with situations where kids wanted to take things that we couldn't offer because we didn't have enough class periods in the day to offer them. And by the second year that he was there, we were losing kids because we weren't offering enough. And I said to him, look, I think there's a way that we can do it. And I said, if we were to offer 8 classes, but we met only 7 of them every day, 8-period drop cycle. Each day you drop a different class. I think we could give the kids more choices. It'll be more complex, but I think after 2 weeks, the kids will be able to figure it out. And then we had to figure out, well, somewhere in between, how do we get the teachers to buy in on it? And there were a lot of teachers who were very, very reticent. They thought this was the stupidest thing. Dropping a different class every day, how are we going to maintain continuity, the whole bit. He started making plans, slotting kids in. We created a schedule with 8 classes potentially meeting, but only 7 of them every day. And everybody that was involved in the scheduling process, and this is before we had computers to do our scheduling for us, this was all done by hand. Everybody that was involved in the process said, well, having that extra class period makes it easier.
Yeah.
So there was an immediate, we could see a win. Our 2 oldest teachers on staff were the ones who were most reticent because they could not see this working. Nobody could prove that to them. I couldn't hand it to them.
Right.
They just said, there's no way it's going to work. 2 weeks in, she came down to my room. I didn't even ask. She came down to my room. She walks in, closes the door, and she says, if we ever change back, I'm killing somebody. And I'm like, what? She goes, this is just freaking brilliant. She could not believe how good the system was because there were a number of wins across the board. I think if you're going to make a change, you got to know why you're changing. You got to be willing to take the advantages and the disadvantages to the change. You got to discuss those. And eventually, you're not going to have 100% buy-in. You never do. What you will eventually get is a most buy-in. And if enough will buy in, adapt, and modify, those that won't change at all anyhow, no matter what you do. And I think in education we have to understand that those individuals have to find a way to adapt in their own environment. They have to be encouraged to be better than what they are, but we also need to understand it's okay to continue moving forward.
I want to make those changes. Do you have any thoughts as to why they're so resistant to change?
I think the first thing was change had never been approached in a logical, clear fashion beforehand.
Okay.
I think a lot of the changes that they had to deal with were, this is what we're going to do. And they never had any buy-in, they never had any input, and what input or buy-in they had was either forced on them or was, thank you very much for your input. That's not the way that you go about change. I think you have to have meaningful dialogue, and I think you have to have sometimes meaningful compromise.
So, have you ever been a part of a change process? And if so, can you explain what that process was?
Sure. Change process had to do with introducing charter schools to a school district of about 10,000 kids.
Decision. And I love that you went out and gathered input. Did you see that lead to people kind of letting their guard down a little bit?
Yeah,
Or, you know what I mean?
people come up and, we're going to do this, and then there's resistance and pushback. Well, gee, no kidding.
Yeah, right.
I'm sorry, you planned for it.
Right.
You say, okay, who's not going to be happy with this and why? Then you go back, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Charter schools, oh, but you want to be different things for different kids, right? So then someone's in resistance. I'm saying, all I'm asking is for you to develop a program that your kids want to be there and their parents want their kids there.
Yeah.
Some leaders have to understand. That's it. Don't come in and say, this is what you must do. There's no ownership there. There's no creativity. There's just, oh, we're doing it why Joe said so. Oh, okay.
Right.
You'll get compliance.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that what our kids deserve, a compliant staff? Jeez, I hope not.
Right. Yeah.
So again, what I'm getting, plan for when you're thinking of something really significantly different, second order change,
Yeah.
it's who might not be happy and why. Think of it, if you have an issue and I've already acknowledged it ahead of time, I'm going, you may be uncomfortable, and I really respect that.
Yeah.
How do we help you being more comfortable?
Yeah.
What if, I'm sorry, I've cut you at the knees
Exactly,
in the sense of
right.
being ticked off.
And
My role at Concordia, I have the task of helping to kind of facilitate and streamline communication processes for the university. And one of the charges that the university has, especially after we've merged with Ann Arbor, is to take steps to make our operations scalable. And so I think we've had processes in the past that have maybe worked, but now kind of part of my role is to accommodate for the growth of the university and the potential growth in the future. So one of the projects that I've been working on over the past couple of years is a university-wide calendaring system. We've had, even before my time at Concordia, there's kind of humorous, but at the same time cringeworthy stories about how the university kind of embarrassed itself because the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. Yeah, Concordia often has, kind of gotten faulted for that especially as we grow, that's a big concern that people talk about, is that we're siloed. I think that there's been significant steps towards remedying that, though, but that definitely was something that had been verbalized before I arrived. I honestly went into it a little bit naively, thinking like, oh my gosh, there's got to be a simpler way for this. And then as I started digging, I realized, oh gosh, there were, roadblocks left, and not roadblocks, but just there was a lot of effort to get everybody, to get the thing communicated to everybody before I could even move forward. Like, I had a lot of checks and balances that I had to go, like, I guess somewhat might call it bureaucracy. It was implementing a plan that was going to touch every single department in the university, because like, very few departments aren't going to at some point have some kind of event, whether that's inviting outside people or just internal people. And so I was really looking to make a touch that would reach everybody. And so it wasn't so much everybody agreed, oh yeah, we got to be on the same page. That everyone agreed, oh, this is embarrassing, we don't know what the other person is doing. But I started getting into territory where I was stepping into, I was potentially disrupting the silos routine department, and that was their job. And then now all of a sudden I was telling them, oh, if you would just put it on the calendar, we could automate it to go to the website, we could automate it to go to email, we could automate it to go to the app. And
on the
so
one hand,
suddenly
they could say, this is actually beneficial because it makes my job more efficient, but
Yeah.
they could also look at it and say, what are you doing? You're taking away my responsibilities.
Yeah, because then they felt threatened that, oh my gosh, now I could be expendable the more we automate stuff. I got a lot of resistance from one individual in particular who I kept on being like, why would she want to spend all her time doing this? And then I don't even remember how it became apparent to me, but it became apparent to me that, like, oh, she wants to do that because she's able to then report to people, I did all of this, and she can feel like she has all of it in control. I was kind of taking control away from her. I think it's really important for people to understand, why are we doing this, and what are the benefits. So I worked really hard to not only communicate why we were doing it, because of all those things that I mentioned earlier in the interview. We want to be on the same page. It's a scheduling tool. But also, I worked hard to kind of communicate to them, here's how it could be beneficial to you.
This particular project was very insightful in terms of not only solidifying the importance of, I think, Kotter's 8-step process, and I know that that wasn't exactly necessarily part of the assignment, wasn't to focus on that, but really, as I looked in particular at my interviews with both Callie and Rick, the first and third interview, both of them went through this process of developing a vision, explaining the vision, and then implementing that vision to maybe a number of employees to get them on board. Then they went through and generated some short-term wins, and ultimately ingrained it in the culture. So it's really neat to see that process. In terms of resistance, which was kind of a big part of this assignment, it made me kind of link actually back to Kotter's 8-step process, where if you don't go through those steps in a proper order, that the change falls apart. And I think that the resistance comes in when those steps aren't followed, which is kind of an interesting thing. In my second interview with Joe, who was trying to implement, and it didn't implement, the system-wide school change of charter schools, he, throughout the interview, and it was tough to talk about and condense down into a short time frame, but I kept trying to get out of him, how did you create urgency? Was there a problem you were trying to solve? Was there another school district who was like doing this? Were there test results or research supporting your decision to? And none of that was there. His change had nothing to do with creating a sense of urgency or solving a problem. And as a result, nobody really saw the benefit of the change. So the change took place. It was implemented. It was forced on the school district. But even today, 15 years later, I can tell you, just from living in the community, having relatives in the school district, the change is not supported at all. There's still no buy-in with this change. In fact, many of the schools have closed as a result. So the change was not really successful in any way. And the resistance, even though he made a great point about the resistance being something that you want to plan for and try to mitigate, I don't know that he did that very effectively, as there's a very big schism between those charter schools and the other public schools in the area. So that was kind of an interesting case study in that I really don't think he was very successful in implementing change and dealing with resistance. Now, in the first and third cases, in terms of managing resistance, I think both Callie and Rick did an outstanding job of understanding. There was a chart, kind of a bell curve in our book, that you can get a majority of the people on board with something just by casting a great vision. But you're always going to have these outliers that are just resisting change. And both of them touched on the fact that the resistance to change came from just a personal fear of what that change might look like in their life, which is kind of interesting. And I think in both cases, what Callie and Rick did to mitigate those particular outliers in terms of resistance was they used their interpersonal skills to go and visit these people and find ways that they could very specifically show these people that this was going to be a benefit to them. It maybe feels like there's a loss involved, but this change really is going to be something that's a positive for them in their life, and it takes a little bit of time to share that with them and have that conversation with them, but I think that's really the key to getting those people on board. So that was really kind of an interesting insight that came out of my interviews.